teenage girl arrives at the emergency room with a newborn in her arms. When the doctor asks where the baby came from, her answer brings everyone to tears. The automatic doors of Boston General's emergency room wheezed open against the howling December wind. Sarah Mitchell stumbled through, her legs trembling from the 3-mile journey that had felt like an eternity. Each step through the deepening snow had been a silent prayer, a desperate mantra of "Please let him live. Please let him live." While memories of her mother's last words echoed in her mind. "Promise me, baby. Promise you'll keep him safe." Her dark hair was crusted with ice, her fingers nearly frozen around the bundle in her arms. The fluorescent lights caught the tears that had frozen on her cheeks during her desperate journey through the storm. In those 3 hours since her mother's death, Sarah had aged years, her 15-year-old shoulders carrying a weight no child should bear. "Please," she gasped, her voice cracking. The word tasted like the copper penny flavor of fear that had been in her mouth since she'd first seen the blood pooling around her mother. "Please help him." The bundle stirred against her chest, and a tiny whimper emerged from within the folds of her winter coat. The same coat her mother had insisted on buying her last Christmas, even though Sarah knew they couldn't afford it. "You need to stay warm, sweetheart. I won't have my girl catching pneumonia." Now that coat was serving as an improvised blanket for her newborn brother, while Sarah's thin sweater offered little protection against the bitter cold. Linda Martinez, the night shift nurse, was already moving before Sarah could say another word. There was something in the girl's eyes, a haunted desperation that spoke of tragedy, that triggered every maternal instinct Linda possessed. "Dr. Chun, need you here, stat?" Dr. James Chun had been fighting the bone-deep exhaustion of hour 14 in his 18-hour shift, his mind drifting to memories of his wife Rebecca at home, and their own struggles with infertility. The urgency in Linda's voice cut through his fatigue like a shot of adrenaline. He turned to see Linda guiding a teenage girl toward the nearest exam room, one arm around her trembling shoulders. He quickly cataloged what he saw. Adolescent, probably 14 or 15, showing signs of extreme cold exposure. Her jeans were soaked and starting to freeze from the knee down, her sweater stained with what his experienced eye recognized as amniotic fluid and blood. But it was her eyes that caught him, wide, haunted, and somehow ancient in her young face. They were her mother's eyes, though he wouldn't know that until later. "I'm Dr. Chan," he said, keeping his voice steady as he fell into step beside them. In 15 years of emergency medicine, he'd learned that his calm could be contagious, even in the most desperate situations. "Can you tell me what's happening?" "He's cold," she whispered, clutching the bundle closer. "I tried so hard to keep him warm. I had to stop every few blocks to check his breathing, to make sure he was still." Her voice broke off in a sob that seemed to come from somewhere deep and broken inside her. The journey through the snowstorm replayed in her mind. The way she'd huddled in doorways to shelter her brother from the wind, how she'd sung lullabies through chattering teeth to keep them both going. The terror each time she had to unwrap him slightly to make sure his chest was still rising and falling. Every step had been a battle between the need to hurry and the fear of slipping on the ice while carrying such precious cargo. They reached the exam room, and Linda gently helped Sarah lay the bundle on the warmed blanket she'd already prepared on the examination table. As the coat fell open, Dr. Chen's breath caught. The newborn couldn't have been more than a few hours old. The umbilical cord had been tied off with what looked like a shoelace, the knot inexpert but functional, the kind of solution born of desperate necessity and quick thinking. Dr. Chun began his assessment, his movements sufficient but gentle. Temperature, definitely hypothermic, but not critically so. Heart rate, rapid but strong. Respiratory effort, labored but adequate. The baby's lips had a slightly bluish tinge, but his color was already improving in the warmth of the exam room. "Where's the mother?" he asked, already reaching for the warming lights and additional blankets. As soon as the words left his mouth, he saw something shatter in the girl's expression, and his heart clenched in anticipation of her answer. Sarah's next words fell into the room like stones into still water, creating ripples that would change all their lives. "He's my brother," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mom died giving birth to him 3 hours ago in our bathroom. I just couldn't let him die too." The last words caught in her throat, tangled with the grief she hadn't allowed herself to feel yet, not while her brother's life hung in the balance. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the steady beep of monitors being attached to the newborn. Dr. Chun saw Linda bring a hand to her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. Even after all his years in the ER, some cases still had the power to crack open his heart. He thought of his own wife at home, of their empty nursery and years of disappointment, and felt something shift inside him. "What's your name?" he asked softly, as he continued examining the baby, noting with growing admiration that despite the traumatic circumstances, someone, clearly this extraordinary young girl, had managed to clear the baby's airways and keep him breathing. The umbilical tie, though improvised, had been placed correctly. Sarah Mitchell. And this is my brother." Mom didn't get to name him. Her voice caught on the word mom, and for a moment, she was back in their small bathroom, holding her mother's hand as it grew cold, watching the life fade from eyes so similar to her own. Dr. Chun nodded, making sure to meet her gaze. "Sarah, you did an amazing job keeping your brother alive. Can you tell me exactly what happened?" Sarah sank into the chair Linda pulled up for her, her legs finally giving out. The adrenaline that had carried her through the snow was fading, leaving behind an exhaustion so profound it seemed to settle in her bones. She could feel the ghost of her mother's last kiss on her forehead, the weight of that final promise hanging between her and the tiny boy under the warming lights. "Mom found out she was pregnant 8 months ago," she began, her voice distant as if the words were coming from somewhere far away. "She lost her insurance when the company downsized, and she was already working 2 jobs just to keep us fed. After Dad left 2 years ago," she swallowed hard, remembering the morning they'd woken to find him gone, leaving nothing but a note and a stack of unpaid bills. "Mom said she could handle it, said women had been giving birth at home for thousands of years." Sarah's hands twisted in her lap, remembering how they trembled as she tied off the umbilical cord. "Everything seemed okay at first. I read everything I could find online about home births. Mom made me promise not to tell anyone. She was afraid they'd take me away if social services found out. I got a job at Rosie's Diner after school, saved whatever I could for baby supplies. We really thought it would be okay." Dr. Chun continued his examination of the newborn as she spoke, but his attention was split between the baby's vital signs and Sarah's story. The boy was starting to pink up nicely under the warming lights, his temperature slowly rising toward normal. In his mind, he was already composing the calls he'd need to make. Social services, the medical examiner, perhaps even his wife Rebecca, who had always said their home had too many empty rooms. But something went wrong, Sarah continued, her voice dropping even lower. "There was so much blood. Mom kept saying it was normal, but I could see she was scared. After he came out, she held him once, just once." Sarah's voice broke, and the tears she'd held back during her long walk through the snow finally began to fall. "She told me she loved us both, made me promise to protect him, and then she was gone. I tried CPR like they showed us in health class, but she wouldn't come back." Linda had moved to stand behind Sarah's chair, her hands resting supportively on the girl's shoulders. Dr. Chun noticed the nurse's tears falling silently into Sarah's snow-damp hair. In that moment, the usual professional distance of the ER seemed to dissolve, replaced by something more fundamental, the shared human experience of loss and love and sacrifice. "The baby wasn't breathing right at first," Sarah continued, the words tumbling out now as if she needed to share the weight of them before they crushed her. "I remembered this video I watched about newborn resuscitation. I cleared his mouth and nose with a bulb syringe we'd bought, gave him rescue breaths until he started crying. Used a clean shoelace for the cord like the website said. I tried calling 911, but our power was out from the storm, and my phone was dead." She looked up at Dr. Chen, her eyes suddenly fierce despite the tears. I knew Mom was gone, but he was alive and I had to choose. Mom always said that being brave isn't about not being scared. It's about doing what needs to be done even when you're terrified. So I wrapped him in my coat, locked our apartment and started walking, The pride and anguish in her voice made Dr. Chen's throat tight. He thought about his own sister, about the bonds of family that could drive someone to walk through a snowstorm with a newborn, carrying not just an infant but the weight of an impossible choice. "You did protect him, Sarah," he said softly. "You did everything right. Your brother is going to be fine thanks to you." As if in confirmation, the baby let out a strong cry, his color now a healthy pink. Sarah reached out a trembling hand to touch his tiny fingers, and the newborn instinctively grasped her index finger. In that simple reflex, Sarah felt the first warmth she'd experienced since her mother's last breath. "I need to call the authorities," Dr. Chan said gently, "and we'll need to send someone to your apartment. But I promise you we're going to help you both through this. You're not alone anymore." Sarah nodded, not taking her eyes off her brother. Can I stay with him?" "Of course," Linda answered before Dr. Chun could. "I'll bring you some dry clothes and something hot to drink. You're both safe now." As Dr. Chun stepped out of the room to make the necessary calls, he paused in the doorway, watching Sarah lean close to the warming bed, still letting her brother grip her finger. She was whispering something to him, too soft to hear, but Dr. Chun could read her lips. "I kept my promise, Mom. I kept my promise." He had to take a moment to compose himself before reaching for his phone. The weight of what he'd witnessed settled around his shoulders like a heavy cloak. In all his years of emergency medicine, he'd seen countless examples of human tragedy and triumph. But there was something about this. It was about a 15-year-old girl walking 3 miles through a snowstorm to save her newborn brother, carrying not just an infant but the weight of an impossible choice that would stay with him forever. As he dialed the number for social services, his free hand unconsciously touched the photo he kept in his wallet. A picture of him and Rebecca on their wedding day, both smiling with hopes of the family they'd build together. Maybe, he thought, this night wasn't just about Sarah keeping her promise to her mother. Maybe it was about all of them finding what they needed in the midst of tragedy. Sarah and her brother finding safety, Linda finding purpose in her care, and him, perhaps finding the family he and Rebecca had been waiting for all along. The story of Sarah Mitchell and her unnamed brother was just beginning, but Dr. Chun knew that in those first crucial hours, she had demonstrated more courage and love than many people show in a lifetime. As he waited for the call to connect, he made a silent promise of his own. These children would not face their future alone. 8 months earlier, Sarah Mitchell sat cross-legged on her mother's bed, watching Claire stare at the pregnancy test with trembling hands. The spring sunlight filtering through their apartment's thin curtains caught the silver strands in her mother's dark hair. When had those appeared? Sarah wondered if they'd multiplied in the 2 years since Dad left, like rings in a tree marking seasons of hardship. "Mom," Sarah's voice seemed too loud in the small bedroom. "Are you okay?" Claire Mitchell looked up at her daughter, and for a moment, Sarah saw something she'd never witnessed in her mother's eyes before. Pure, unbridled fear. But then, like so many times before, Claire squared her shoulders and forced a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Of course, sweetheart. It's just unexpected." Claire sat down heavily on the bed beside Sarah, the cheap mattress sagging beneath their combined weight. "I didn't think this was even possible anymore. I'm 42. For heaven's sake." Sarah reached for her mother's hand, noting how cold her fingers felt. "What are we going to do?" The word "we" hung in the air between them. Since David Mitchell had walked out 2 years ago, leaving nothing but a note and a mountain of debt, we had been their shield against the world. "We'll figure it out. We'll make it work. We have each other." Claire's free hand drifted to her still flat stomach. I can't keep it," she whispered, then immediately shook her head. "No, I can't get rid of it. I just can't." Tears welled in her eyes. "But Sarah, baby, I don't know how we're going to manage. The insurance. After the downsizing at work." Sarah squeezed her mother's hand. "We'll figure it out. We always do." But figuring it out proved harder than either of them could have imagined. The following week, Claire sat at their small kitchen table, calculator in hand, bills spread out before her like a complicated puzzle she couldn't solve. Sarah watched from the doorway as her mother's shoulders slumped further with each calculation. The maintenance job at the school pays weekly, Claire muttered, more to herself than to Sarah. If I pick up extra shifts at the diner on weekends. She looked up, startled to find Sarah watching her. Oh, honey, I'm sorry. Did I wake you? It was nearly midnight. Sarah should have been asleep, but she'd heard her mother's quiet sobs through the thin walls. Mom, I can get a job too. Lots of places hire 15-year-olds. Absolutely not. Your job is school. My job is helping my family, Sarah interrupted, crossing to sit beside her mother. And like it or not, there's going to be 3 of us soon. Claire's hand went to her stomach again. It had become an unconscious gesture over the past week. Sarah, you're just a child. You shouldn't have to. I'm not just a child. I haven't been just a child since Dad left. The words came out sharper than Sarah intended, and she saw her mother flinch. Sorry, I just mean, let me help. Please. In the dim kitchen light, with bills scattered across the table like fallen leaves, Claire looked at her daughter, really looked at her. When had Sarah's face lost its baby roundness? When had her eyes grown so serious? Okay, Claire finally whispered, but we have to be careful. If anyone finds out about the baby before it's born, if they realize we don't have insurance or proper medical care, they might take me away, Sarah finished. She'd heard enough stories from kids at school about social services and foster care. I won't let that happen. We'll keep it secret. And so began their conspiracy of 2, protecting a third life that grew steadily beneath Claire's heart. Sarah got a job at Rosie's Diner, working the after-school shift from 4 to 8. Her first paycheck went entirely to prenatal vitamins and folic acid supplements she'd researched online. The second went into a secret fund for baby supplies, diapers, wipes, the absolute essentials they'd need. May turned to June, and Claire's morning sickness made working 2 jobs nearly impossible. Sarah would wake early to hold her mother's hair back, then make sure she ate at least a few crackers before heading to the school maintenance job. Between shifts at the diner, Sarah spent hours in the public library, reading everything she could find about pregnancy and childbirth. She printed articles about home births, studied diagrams until they were burned into her memory, and bookmarked every medical website she could find on her phone. One sweltering July evening, as they sat in their unair-conditioned apartment eating mac and cheese, the only thing Claire could keep down that week, Sarah noticed her mother wincing as she shifted in her chair. You're back again? Claire tried to smile. It's nothing, sweetheart. Just tired. But Sarah was already moving behind her mother's chair, remembering the massage techniques she'd learned from a YouTube video. As her fingers worked the knots in her mother's shoulders, Claire let out a small sob. Mom? Did I hurt you? No, baby. It's just... Claire reached up to catch Sarah's hand. I'm supposed to be taking care of you, not the other way around. Sarah leaned down to hug her mother from behind, careful of the small bump that was now visible. Maybe we're supposed to take care of each other. August brought heat waves and more complications. Claire's ankles swelled so badly she could barely make it through her shifts at the school. The maintenance job didn't offer sick days, so she worked through the pain, coming home each night to soak her feet in cold water while Sarah read pregnancy books aloud. Listen to this, Sarah said one evening, cross-legged on the bathroom floor while her mother soaked her feet. The second trimester is often called the honeymoon period of pregnancy. Some honeymoon? Huh? Claire laughed, then winced as the baby kicked. Your brother or sister is quite the dancer. Brother, Sarah said confidently. Definitely a brother. I can tell. Oh, you can you? Claire splashed a bit of water at her daughter. And how exactly did you become such an expert? Sarah dodged the water, grinning. Just a feeling. Plus, boys are more trouble, and this one's already causing plenty. Their laughter echoed off the bathroom tiles, and for a moment, everything felt normal. Just a mother and daughter sharing a joke. But then Claire's hand went to her side, her face tightening with pain, and reality crashed back in. Mom! Sarah was on her feet instantly. What's wrong? Nothing, just... Claire took a deep breath. Just a strong kick. Really strong. Sarah helped her mother out of the bathroom and into bed, trying to ignore the worry gnawing at her stomach. That night, she stayed up late researching pregnancy complications, making lists of warning signs to watch for, and wondering, not for the first time, if they were in way over their heads. September brought cooler weather and new challenges. Claire's pregnancy was becoming impossible to hide. She wore loose clothing and avoided eye contact with customers at the diner, but questions were inevitable. Sarah learned to run interference, to deflect curious looks with teenage chatter and strategic positioning behind the counter. One afternoon, Mrs. Henderson, a regular customer known for her gossip, cornered Claire by the coffee maker. "Claire Mitchell, are you expecting?" Sarah, wiping down nearby tables, felt her heart stop. But her mother, who had always taught her that the best lies contain a grain of truth, simply laughed. "Oh, Mrs. Henderson, at my age, I've just been stress eating since David left. You know how it goes." The old woman clucked sympathetically. "Men, who needs them? Although," she leaned in conspiratorially, "a little bird told me David's back in town. Saw him at the Stop and Shop just yesterday." Sarah dropped her cleaning rag. Claire's hand trembled as she poured coffee, but her voice remained steady. "Is that so? Well, good for him. Sarah, honey, table 6 needs their check." That night, after her shift, Sarah found her mother sitting in the dark living room, one hand on her swollen belly, the other holding an old photograph. In the dim light from the street lamp outside, Sarah could make out her parents' smiling faces, their wedding day, before everything fell apart. "Mom," Sarah sat beside her on the couch. You're not thinking of telling him, are you?" Claire set the photo down with deliberate care. "No. He lost the right to know when he walked out on us." She turned to Sarah, her eyes fierce in the darkness. "But baby, if anything happens to me, don't..." Sarah's voice cracked. "Don't even say that. We have to be practical, Sarah. If anything happens, you need to know. Your father lives with his new family in Dorchester. His mother, your grandmother, is still in her old house on Maple Street. If you ever need help, nothing's going to happen to you," Sarah insisted, but she memorized the information anyway, filing it away with all the other emergency procedures she'd learned, just in case. October brought early frosts and more close calls. At school, Sarah's grades began to slip as exhaustion took its toll. Her English teacher, Mrs. Walsh, kept her after class one day. "Sarah, is everything all right at home? You seem distracted lately." For a moment, Sarah was tempted to tell her everything about the baby, about their lack of insurance, about her terror every time her mother winced or grabbed her side. Mrs. Walsh had always been kind, had even given Sarah extra credit assignments when she missed homework due to work. But then she remembered her mother's fears about social services, about being separated, about the baby being taken away. So she forced a smile and blamed her tiredness on college application stress. That evening, helping her mother fold tiny onesies they'd bought at the Goodwill, Sarah asked, "Mom, do you ever regret it? Keeping the baby?" Claire's hands stilled on a small yellow sleeper. "No, never. But I regret putting so much on your shoulders. You shouldn't have to carry all this." "I want to," Sarah said fiercely. "We're family, the three of us." November arrived with the first snow and mounting fears. Claire's blood pressure was rising. Sarah could tell from the headaches and dizziness her mother tried to hide. They'd bought a blood pressure cuff from the pharmacy, and Sarah checked it religiously, comparing the numbers to the charts she'd memorized. "Maybe we should tell someone," Sarah suggested one night, after her mother nearly fainted at work. Just in case." But Claire was adamant. "We've come this far. Just a few more weeks. Women have been giving birth at home for thousands of years." "Yeah, and they died doing it for thousands of years too," Sarah muttered, but not loud enough for her mother to hear. The first week of December brought a heavy snowstorm and the beginning of the end. Claire's hands and face were swelling badly, and she could barely make it through her shifts. Sarah started sleeping on the floor beside her mother's bed, too afraid to be in her own room in case something happened during the night. On December 10th, Sarah came home from her shift at the diner to find her mother crying in the bathroom. "Mom, what's wrong?" I think," I think it's starting, Claire whispered. But it's too early. And something feels wrong. Sarah's heart began to race. But her voice remained calm. The voice of the capable young woman she'd been forced to become. Okay, we can handle this. Let me check your blood pressure. But they couldn't handle it. Not really. Not when the contractions came too fast and too hard. Not when the blood started. Not when Claire's eyes began to glaze over, her grip on Sarah's hand weakening. Promise me, Claire gasped. After the baby, a boy, just as Sarah had predicted, had emerged into his sister's trembling hands. Promise you'll keep him safe. I promise, Sarah sobbed, trying to focus on clearing the baby's airways like she'd learned, trying not to see how pale her mother had become. I promise, Mom. Just please don't leave us. But some promises can't be kept, no matter how desperately we wish they could. And some must be kept, no matter the cost. 3 hours later, Sarah Mitchell would walk through the doors of Boston General's emergency room, carrying her newborn brother and the weight of that final promise. But in that moment, kneeling on the bathroom floor beside her mother's body, watching her brother take his first breaths as their mother took her last, Sarah understood something about love and sacrifice that most people take a lifetime to learn. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is simply keep going, one step at a time, carrying our promises through the storm. The social worker arrived at Boston General just before dawn. Sarah watched her approach through the nursery window, where she'd been standing vigil over her brother for the past 4 hours. The woman's sensible shoes squeaked against the freshly waxed floor, a sound that would forever remind Sarah of this moment, this threshold between her old life and whatever came next. Sarah? Dr. Chen's voice was gentle behind her. He'd stayed well past the end of his shift, something about paperwork he needed to finish. But Sarah suspected it had more to do with the way his eyes lingered on her brother's tiny form. This is Ms. Talia Rodriguez from Child Protective Services. She's here to help. Sarah didn't turn away from the window. In the nursery, a nurse was changing her brother's tiny diaper with practiced efficiency. He looked impossibly small under the warming lights, but his color was good now, and his cries were strong. Look, Mom, she thought, I did what you asked.